Thank you, Tony. How about a hand for Tony putting this whole thing together? When he said that Martha made this possible, that's not quite true. She made it impossible for me to say no. That's how clear it was. I was going to do this. So yeah, I'm a psychologist, and so the mental part of the game has always interested me. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about where the pressure comes from psychologically, where nerves, performance fears, performance pressures really come from, and what my compete, learn, honor approach is meant to do to help athletes deal with those performance pressures, and a few points of emphasis that whether you pick up anything from the compete, learn, honor approach or some other way of looking at your mental and emotional skills, if you do these few things, it will make your studying and your practice of mental and emotional skills more effective. So that's what I plan to cover in my time. Before I get into that, though, I have to start with pointing out that my path to being a coach and a certified tennis teaching pro is not the normal path. I only started tennis when I was age 42, and Martha was my first teacher, and I fell in love with the game. But what happened, which is kind of what brought me here today in a long, circuitous path from those years ago, was that I was fascinated by the psychology and the mental and emotional, and I was also embarrassed as a 42-year-old grown man with a PhD in psychology that tennis did not bring out the best in me. It really brought out the jerk in me. I wanted to win so badly, and I know no one here understands that. I wanted to win so badly that, even just losing a point, I could get upset. I could frown, shrug my shoulders, could throw in an obscenity or two here and there, throw a racket now and again, channeling my best John McEnroe. And that's not a good thing for those of you who remember John McEnroe. That's not a good thing. It got so comical at one point that one of my pros said, "Peter, you're not good enough to be that angry." And that started me on the right path. And Martha sealed the deal when she said, basically, "I'm not going to play with you anymore unless you clean it up." So I cleaned it up. But I discovered that no matter what age you start the sport, you have to go through your infancy, toddlerhood, childhood, adolescence of tennis, pickleball, golf, whatever it is. Whether you started at 10 or 42 or 72. So I did that, and it really reminded me of how deep some of this stuff goes. And the source of it, of the psychological fears, is very primitive, and it's not conscious, therefore. Most of it is irrational, okay? In psychology, we've got this theory of human motivation called self-determination theory. And it's more in the theory. That doesn't sound like there's science behind it, it's just a theory. It's 30, 40 years of solid research that backs it up. And what it says basically is, we call it the ABCs of human motivation, that there are three fundamental human needs that drive our behavior and our thinking. We have the need for autonomy, for belonging, and for competence. So autonomy is human beings like to have control. We don't like things just happening to us. Well, good luck in pickleball and tennis. There's a lot that's not under our control, right? Belonging. We want to have satisfying relationships, connections to others and to ideas and things that are bigger than we are. And competence, we want to be good at something, and hopefully several things, that we value, that the people we value, and then society values. So when the ABCs are basically going okay, then we can perceive adversity and difficulty and disappointment and loss and rejection as challenges to be met. If something's unbalanced in the ABCs, all that adversity and difficulty become threats. They become existential threats to our identity. And it's all happening back here in our lizard brain. It's not happening up here. And that's why it's so deep, and why 42-year-olds can throw rackets and paddles. It's lizard brain taking over. So the stuff I write about in the book and how I organize our practice, our seasons, around the compete, learn, honor approach is meant to help our players, and hopefully some of this can help some of you, manage those fears, nerves, performance pressures a little better. And I say manage, not eliminate. Because number one, we're human beings, we can't eliminate them, okay? If I tell a player, don't judge yourself, I mean, that's just folly, because we're human beings, we're gonna judge ourselves. So I tell them, okay, change the word judge to evaluate, okay? Make it a little less personal, but we're gonna do it. So it's manage these things, not eliminate them. And the way that we do that is by putting up, we've got a couple of posters that express our team culture. Compete, learn, honor, which I came up with, and another one, we build people up, we don't tear them down, which one of my senior girls came up with a few years ago. So we hang compete, learn, honor, and then you can show the other one. And we build people up on the tennis fence with clothespins every day. And we talk about that in the first week of practice. And then every day we put another one or two of the couple of dozen or so compete, learn, honor principles that you have in one of your handouts up on the fence, and we talk about it. And that is meant to help begin to get a little bit of distance, depersonalizing some of this, and a little bit of an antidote to the lizard brain, which is unconscious. We're trying to make new conscious neural pathways, basically, in the players. And I want to tell you, that's great, thank you both. To illustrate the power of the mindsets, I want to share something with you. A couple weeks ago, I was doing some research for a little mini talk I was going to give to the WashU women's tennis team. And in so doing, I came across some of my old tennis match notes. I used to write notes, sometimes pages, about one match. It was like, an article in the Post-Standard, Post-Dispatch, just describing what the match was, what worked, what didn't. And in this case, I have two matches on one page, and it's very instructive because they show two completely different mindsets in those matches. One of which I won, one of which I lost. I was down in both, came back and won, did not come back in the other. And it was mindset that did it. And here's what I wrote. This is 15 years ago, after I had stopped throwing rackets. So, I win the first one. I lost the first set. It was close. Then I won the second set in a tie break, and I took it in the third. But here's what I wrote. I was down 2 breaks, 1-4, and 15-40 in the second set. For you tennis players, you know that I was pretty close to death at that point. Yeah. But I wrote, I had good self-talk, positive self-talk and positive body language, a couple of the principles that we talk about. And I was saying to myself, quote, he still has to win it. I was still down as I was loving the battle. These are all principles in your handout in the book. Loving the battle, wanting to solve the puzzle, keep trying different things. Never give up, no excuses, don't give up. All points are big points. Focus on right now. What matters is right now. Not the point you just played, not the one you're going to play 5 minutes from now, right now. I was doing all that. My mindset was clear as a bell. I came back and I won. 1 week later, same guy, 1 week later, I write terrible first serve percentage, loads of unforced errors on the forehand, usually to the open court. I had the shot. It was there. It was there. And I blew it. And what I wrote was, I played scared and nervous, wanting to beat him so badly, I choked when I had the chance. And I asked myself, what if this were the last tennis match you'd ever play? How would you play then? And I answered myself and underlined, nothing to lose. Nothing to lose. In the first match that I won, I played like I had nothing to lose. And I came back and won. In the second match, I played like I had everything to lose. And I lost. That's the lizard brain. And the first match, I overcame it. So that's what the Compete, Learn, Honor is trying to do. You know, help players play more like they have nothing to lose than that they have everything to lose. Okay? And don't get me wrong. It minimizes the focus on winning very intentionally. We minimize it. Here's how we define Compete, Learn, Honor. Compete. We're going to give 100% effort all the time. That doesn't mean we're going to play at our personal best all the time. That's impossible. It's always like this, not only over a week, a month, a season, but within a match, within a game. You can't stay at the same level. If you do, okay, that day you were in the zone, but that's rare, right? So the best you have on any given day, the game you walk onto the court with, you're going to give 100% of that all the time. Learn, we're going to be open, curious, and humble learners. And I'm going to come back to humble. And honor, by how we act, we're going to bring credit to ourselves, our teammates, our coaches, opponents, officials, our family, school, and the game of tennis, pickleball, fill in the blank. And so my coaching philosophy is, if we're keeping our players safe, and if they're doing Compete, Learn, Honor faithfully with integrity, and we're having fun in the process, then guess what? We've had a successful season, regardless of our W's and L's. We've had a successful season. So the winning and the losing is minimized. But I don't want you to misunderstand. This doesn't mean that winning doesn't matter, that we don't care about winning. We do. We train to win. We want to win. We go out there competing, hoping to win. But that's not our goal. Our goal are all these principles of Compete, Learn, Honor, staying safe, and having fun. That's how we define success. What a lot of this boils down to is helping our players focus on the things they can control. Now, I'm not very good at this, and this isn't very big, but I have a little, remember Venn diagrams from middle school or junior high back in my day? Well, if you look, the big circle says what matters, things that are important, right? It's a big circle. The smaller circle are what you can control. There's a lot of things you can't control. The intersection of those, things that matter and that you can control, is where your training focus needs to be. That's what the Compete, Learn, Honor is about. These are mental and emotional things that you can control. They matter, and you can control them. All of them are important, but the two, and I think I talk about them in the article that's included in your handouts, the two that are really the gateways for everything else, that if you remember none of these other principles but these two, I think these are the two most important for any sport. And people are using this Compete, Learn, Honor in lots of sports, youth sports across the country now. One is love the game more than how you perform. love the game more than how you perform. And the second is lose yourself. Humility allows you to learn. They're very related, both of them, you know. But love the game is real simple. Love the game more than how you perform. Any contest, half the people going to lose. And, you know, in singles or doubles, you know, somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose. Most of us are not like, you know, Carson Haskins, the tennis state champ we had at Parkway South. He won 4 state titles in a row, just graduated a couple years ago. Undefeated, never lost a set. Okay, most of us are not Carson, you know. I mean, if you are, if your goal is to win and you're winning, keep doing that. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. That's working for you. I lost a lot. I won a lot, but I lost a lot when I was playing. Most of us do. And if you're only enjoying the game when you win, then guess what? You're spending a lot of time doing something you're not enjoying. Why would you do that? Something that you're doing voluntarily. So part of it is helping use these mantras to remind ourselves why we fell in love with the sport in the first place. You guys are here because you love playing pickleball. You know, I'm a tennis guy because I love playing tennis. You know, Rafa Nadal was asked after he won his 19th tennis Grand Slam at the US Open last fall. They tried to bait him into saying how much he really wanted to be, when it was all over, the guy with the most Grand Slams. And he said, sure, who wouldn't? I mean, that would be nice, but that's not why I play tennis. I play tennis because I love playing tennis. That's simple. That's it, right? So we want to help people get to that frame of mind. And the losing of the self, the focus on the self, is critically important part of that. If you're focused on yourself, that's why we choke. Choking under performance pressure is because we have failed to lose ourselves. We have actually increased the focus on ourself, our feelings, our worries, all those lizard brain things around the ABCs: autonomy, belonging, and competence. Okay? When you lose yourself and you take it less personally, you're much more able to see objectively what's happening out there in the flow of your match and make adjustments than if you're taking it personally and allowing it to get yourself down in the dumps, the phrase that, you know, Tony used. So we try and really emphasize those two things as kind of the gateways. And I think beyond what we, you know, put up on these posters, we talk about them. It's mostly rehearsing. It's rehearsing these words, saying them until you believe them. You know, fake it till you make it. I just have them constantly repeat these things, and we talk about what they mean to the players. You can do the same thing. You're not on a team, most of you, but some of you, maybe many of you, you know, have a pro, Mike or somebody else, so you have a coach. You can do the same thing. We do some breathing, we do some muscle relaxing, we do some imagery and visualization, but it's all in the service of rehearse, rehearse, rehearse. Okay? You need to have a between point routine, a before return routine, a before serve routine that is both physical and mental. You've got to know how you're going to respond, you know, when you're down in the score, what you're going to tell yourself when you're up in the score, how you're going to keep the momentum going. All that can be rehearsed. That's what all this is about. And I think when I thought about this, I thought, you know, it's even more important for pickleball folks to do this than tennis folks. And the reason is that I think most of what you're playing is first to 11, right? I mean, in a tournament, maybe first to 15, but you're playing a lot of first to 11. Now, in a close match, 11-9, you're not playing just 20 points because of the scoring rules, but you're not playing as many points as in a typical tennis match, which is playing 100 to 150 points. So what does that mean? That means that a tennis player has longer time to recover from any stinking thinking going on. A pickleball player has less time. You've got to be fast in your recovery, just like you have to be fast to the ball, right? So it's even more incumbent on you guys to have not only your game plan, what are we going to do, talk to your doubles partner, have a plan before the first ball, but a mental and emotional plan to the extent that you can. So there's 3 points of emphasis as my time is winding up. 3 points of emphasis that are going to help you be effective in strengthening mental and emotional skills, whether you use any of this stuff or some other source. There's lots of good stuff out there. And it boils down to choose it, build habits, and small improvements. Choose it. I tell my players, high school, college, and I tell you, you are the boss of your pickleball business. I tell my players, you're the CEO of your tennis career. We coaches and pros, we're advisors, we're consultants, but we're not making the decisions. You are. You have to decide how much of your practice, training, study time is going to be mental and emotional versus all of it being technical, maybe some of it strategic. So what is the percentage you're willing to devote to that? It has to be intentional and explicit. It's not going to happen by osmosis. It's not going to happen accidentally. If you want to get better at this stuff, it's no different than getting better on your serve. You've got to practice it, okay? Which leads to the second point of emphasis. These things on the posters and in your hand, these are not tips or tricks. They are mantras and principles for building new habits that kind of dilute the impact of the lizard brain a little bit and get you more up here in the prefrontal cortex, where we're smarter. And then eventually through a lot of training, that becomes the new automatic. Okay, so your lizard brain has gotten smarter through repetition. Okay, so if the average age in here, okay, is what? The average age in here is 25 or 30? So, I mean, whatever, let's say it's 50. You've had 50 years of building neural pathways when adversity happens. It's to the point now where we're all experts in ourselves for how to behave, because it's practically automatic. That's why it's so difficult to change. Okay? The good news is it won't take 50 years to change it. But it does take some effort, because you're trying to literally increase the myelin, thicken the myelin, the wrapping around the brain nerves, so that the transmission of brain signals can go faster. And the faster they go, the more automatic you are in the flow of the match. That's what you're aiming for. But it takes some time and some work. And I tell my players, and I know it's a horrible pun, but I use it anyhow, you got to put the miles in to get the mile in. Right? Yeah, you can groan, go ahead. But I'm not going to apologize. You'll remember that. It takes time. It does take time. And the third thing, though, is a positive counterpoint to that, small improvements. My advice is don't try and set a goal for 50% improvement in anything, okay? You might get there, but it's going to be, a horror show along the way. You're going to have a lot of bad days, or terrible days, as you say. What I tell our players is we're aiming for 1%, 2%, 5% improvement in several things. Because an accumulation of tiny adjustments and improvements can create huge differences in your results, okay? You want to go 3.5 to 4.0 or 4.0 to 4.5, fabulous. Those are big steps, though. They're bigger than you think. And you can get there, but you won't get there overnight. You get there by working backwards, and what do I have to do? And breaking everything down into tiny improvement goals that will steadily get you there, and you'll have a good feeling about it because you'll consistently be reaching goals if you set reasonable 1%, 2%, 5% improvement goals. Okay, so that's what we do. Just the same way that if you change the angle of the paddle, the racket in tennis, change that angle by 1/2 degree to a degree, and the swing path 1/2 degree to a degree, tiny adjustment here can mean feet on the other side. And a major difference in the characteristics of the shot, in the pace, in the height, the spin, the depth. So little adjustments can make huge differences. So go for little adjustments. Last thing. The most important thing I tell my players is not actually written in this book or in that handout, but it's a derivation. It's a variation on one of them. It's a variation on love the game more than how you perform. And that is that your self-worth has nothing to do with whether you win or lose. It took me a long time to understand that. That was part of my infancy, tennis infancy, and toddlerhood and childhood. Your self-worth does not depend on winning and losing. A couple of years ago, our #1 JV girls team they were struggling. They were having a hard time. They were down, for those of you in tennis, from tennis backgrounds, they were down 1-6 in a 1st-to-8 pro set, playing no ad. So no deuces and add in, add out stuff, just at 40-40, next point wins the game. So at 1-6, 1st-to-8, they were on the brink, right? And they were down on themselves and just, completely out of sync. And I had called them over earlier for a talk and been very successful because they promptly lost the next 3 games. So I thought, okay, I'm going to try it one more time. Coach, never give up. So I called them over to the fence on that changeover, and I said, look, I know you guys know this, but I want to remind you that how I feel about you has nothing to do with whether you win or lose. I love you whether you win or lose. And one of them smiled at me, smiled to her partner, and said, Coach Pete said he loves us. And you could just see the tension and the tightness melt away. Melt away. They were smiling, they giggled, they ran back out on the court with positive energy, having fun, playing in a flowing, instinctive way. It was beautiful. There's no fairy tale ending. I mean, they lost. This is real life. They lost. But they only lost 6-8, having been down 1-6. They won 5 of the last 7 games. Like Michael Jordan once said, he said, I've never lost a game, I've just run out of time. They didn't lose, they ran out of time. And so at our season-ending awards banquet, I highlighted that match as one of the finest matches of our season, because that was compete, learn, and honor in a nutshell. All because they were reminded about the B in the ABC, the belonging, that they were okay with me, whether they won or lost. So the bottom line about all this is winning does not make you a better person. Losing does not make you a worse person. That's a very, very hard lesson to get past that lizard brain, but it's worth the effort. So thank you. Appreciate you being here.